Hey everybody, Ken Adams here with another episode of 100% Uptime by P2P Labs. And today we're joined by Phil Lembo, owner and president of CyberData Corp, and so much more. You'll find out as we get into it. And of course, our co-founder and CEO, Dave George. So Dave, why don't you take it away?
All right, Ken. Well, today we're diving into the mind of a telecom veteran who's navigated the era of legacy telecom. He's ridden the waves of analog, digital, and I would argue even cloud UC. He's steered through the challenges of the COVID era supply chain chaos. And I'm sure he can remember that. That was only 5 years ago. But maybe more importantly, now he sees emerging opportunities in areas like software as a service, especially within like IP endpoints, hybrid paging, and emergency and non-emergency notification channels. So, Phil, welcome to 100% Uptime.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So, Phil, take us back to the beginning. What originally drew you into this industry, and what were some of the early moments that kind of shaped your path?
Great question. Great start. CyberData has been in business for 51 years. Originally started by my dad. My dad was a software programmer from the early days. Worked on old mainframes, Burroughs, and these sort of machines back in the late 50s. Math major, because if you were a math major, you were a programmer automatically. That's how it was back then.
Applied
And
mathematics.
applied mathematics, and he worked for various companies, and he provided programming services throughout the early 60s as I was growing up, for companies that needed data management on time slices of IBM 360 mainframes. That they would go in there and get on the little terminal and start typing away and writing programs and punch cards and tape backup and
Oh yeah.
and
I'm
and
getting the
and
shakes.
yeah, my introduction was he would go to always work on Saturdays, and for some reason I would always go with him. And I think it's because my mom says get him out of the house and go do something with him. So I became an expert on loading punch cards, putting tape reels onto the machine and getting those all set up, and as well as miscellaneous tasks around there. And that's sort of the technology kind of bug bit me back then. And of course, that was a whole different era back in those days. So fast forward to the late 70s, graduated, went to Cal Poly, got my double E. Went back to Monterey. My dad's company, CyberData, at that time. CyberData was a name of a computer data storage device made by Control Data, and it
Oh,
was the CyberData disk drive. Right, and it was this monster machine, probably as big as my kitchen table here, that I think had 1 megabyte and or 5 megabytes and 1 megabyte removable with some sort of medium. I don't even remember what the thing is, but that's how the term cyber data came out. And of course, today people are going, "Well, are you a security company? Is it a cyber security?" No, but that was originally where the name came out. So. We ended up, the company, CyberData, ended up developing software for retail point of sale. And the retail point of sale systems basically had a thing where they would get a price of an item through entering an SKU number on the keyboard, right? And that would go back to a database, and that database would then take that price and bring it back to the operator, and then they would know what that price is for that item. So prior to scanners, prior to laser scanners, prior to these kind of things, that's what they did, is entered this sort of 7 or 8 digit number for every device that has, and that was the high technology portion of it. So,
yeah. I have to
si
ask, did
yes.
that run on the old green screen terminals, or was it actually on like a
So
IBM,
so so
micro back then
so
or
the
something?
behind the scenes, Of course, it was the green screen,
Hmm.
phosphorus terminals there.
Okay.
But at the point of sale end of it, it was a cash register. And it was one of the first electronic cash registers, like a lot of mechanical things that are in there, just monster machine, big power supplies, these kind of things. And the ones that were the leaders, it's kind of interesting. Singer business machines, okay, which is the same
Hmm.
company that made Singer sewing machines,
Yeah.
Mhm.
bought a calculator manufacturer called Frieden. And Frieden made the first Nixie tube calculators, right? And they basically ended up building a cash register that was made by manufactured by Singer Business Machines. So sewing machine making cash registers. Strange world. So
Really cool.
these cash registers communicated to the back office machine via a proprietary two-wire network. And I'm actually remember the name of this called MDIOC. And this, I think it was a 9600 baud proprietary type of two-wire interface that sent messages back and forth between the point of sale terminal and the memory disk drive unit that basically pulled all that data back to be able to do it. And of course,
Wow.
there's utilities that ran on the back office that was able to update price files and these kind of things. So anyway, fast
Wow.
forward, we were approached by a company, Kmart of Canada, who had all of these point of sale terminals that were made by Singer Business Machines, and they
Mhm.
wanted to upgrade their system. So they contracted with my dad's company at the time to basically build the software that did the data management in the back office. All right. Well, the company that they hired to build the board that effectively communicated across this network from these cash registers, this MDIOC interface, the company went out of business. And
Hmm.
so the principal at head of IT, or the I can't remember exactly what his title was, but the head guy at Kmart of Canada said, "Hey, Charlie, name my dad, would you be interested in doing this?" And of course, like most people, he, sure, no problem.
Yeah.
Didn't know anything about it. Okay,
Mhm.
so where we were located in Monterey, we're at a place where the Navy has a naval postgraduate school, and
Mhm.
it's a higher level education area for the brightest people in the Navy that go there to work on their doctorates and their programs. So here he hired a couple people there that were, one guy was an F-18 pilot, and another guy was a helicopter guy working on some sort of blade angle articulation, high tech at the time thing.
Right.
And he hired these guys part time to help design this board that would fit into this device back in the office to collect the data from these cash registers in an optically coupled interface. So that's tied in right to the point where I was coming into the scene, and I was part of the development team that worked on building this board to be able to interface these things, and had a lot of knowledge of electronics, and so I was able to help with that aspect of it, and so we ended up building this, and we ended up rolling out to this Kmart company in Canada about 300 of these back office machines that were out there. Okay. That collected this data from these old Singer business machine point of sale terminals that were there. Well, that worked great. And the next phase was the fact that these Singer business machine, they went out of business, and they were looking for a replacement cash register. So the same guy called up my dad and said, "Hey, Charlie, would you be interested in building us a cash register?" Okay. Sure. Okay. Because we didn't know anything about it. And then I remember the
Why
meeting
not?
that day. We said, "Okay, can we do this?" Yeah, sure, we can build it. So we ended up building and designing a first point of sale terminal. Okay.
Very
This point of sale
cool.
terminal, yeah, used an 8080 microcontroller,
Sure.
had, if I remember, 16K of RAM, and 8K of PROM,
Hmm.
1702As. I remember that.
You just
And
described a Commodore 64, by the way,
Right,
Right.
right, right, right.
Exactly.
And I mean,
or a
that was
VIC-20.
that was the technology at the time, right? I mean,
Right,
that's what they
right.
did. So we ended
Mhm.
up building this terminal. We contracted with a Japanese manufacturer named Kyocera. And Kyocera,
Sure.
everybody knows Kyocera now. They're a
Oh
big
yeah.
company, famous
Yep.
for their knives, famous for all their, other types of things that they do. But at that time, they were an aggressive CM that was looking for business, and they actually ended up, building the tooling and building the boards, and that we designed, and I was an integral part of that. Once again, process of doing that because of my electronics background. Other engineers too. I can't take 100% of the credit. And so we ended up selling that cash register to Kmart of Canada, and it was about 3,000. Remember, when we got the PO, it was like, oh my God, we got a PO for 3,000 cash registers. Oh my God, what do we do now? And
Wow.
right, so we ended up. This is going somewhere, and if I'm taking too long, just let me know, and
No,
No, keep
I can.
rolling.
Okay, 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 okay.
This is great history for the younger generations
So
in
so
in
so
telecom.
part of that was installing all these point of sale terminals, and I led a team of people to go across Canada to the different locations to install these point of sale terminals and to integrate them in with the back office system that we also provided from that perspective. And I sort of cut my what's the term? Cut your teeth, or whatever the term
Hmm.
is, that on field service, and being able to, the problems that were happening out, power, we had power issues. We're out in like Manitoba where there's a Kmart. And believe me, Kmart's, they usually don't put them in the best part of towns, to be honest with you. And of course, we're staying at motels that are right there. So especially during the winter in
right.
Winnipeg, it's cold.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But everybody was super nice, and we ended up, that was a several month process of going across Canada to do that, and I have really fond memories of that time. I also have some really bad memories of being super cold and problems and so on and so forth. But I managed it. So anyway, fast forward again, another click there. There was a company in England called ICL, International Computers Limited. And ICL was kind of the IBM of the UK. They made big mainframes. They made all these, types of things for defense and for government services. And like I said, they were the IBM of the UK. They ended up wanting to get into the point of sale business. They wanted to do that. So they ended up buying under license. We manufactured it, the same terminal that we built for Kmart. And we ended up shipping those point of sale terminals all over the world and hooked up to their mainframe in the back that was managing that with the software that we're running. And we sold tons of those things, tons. I mean, literally, I remember having the logistics of having to rent freighters, airplane freighters from Japan to ship those to make schedules in different parts of the world. And that was probably mid 70s, maybe mid to late 70s, that kind of time frame there. So
Well,
that
for
business
you and
was
your dad,
great. Go
Phil,
ahead.
for you and your dad, was that the first time you had a aha moment where everything's about to change for the company?
I
Was that
I
the
think
event that you think was the first one, the first aha moment?
if you go back and you look at our history, and I'm going to review some of these things, and once again, if I go too much into the weeds, just let me know. But we've gone through multiple iterations where one profitable venture, we could see the writing on the wall that it started to trend down, and there's
Hmm.
another one that was right there to come back up and move in. We were able to be flexible enough to move into that direction. In effect, what we did at that migration there is we moved from being a software provider, okay, to a job shop, effectively, to being a hardware manufacturer. And that's where I came in, because that was my background. I love hardware and that particular thing, mechanical design and these kind of things. So I was very integral in being able to help that speed that process along. Was it easy? No. Did we have problems? Yes. But that's the world that we still live in, actually. So that was an aha moment. We're moving
Right.
now from a software company to being a hardware provider. So we rode that business for quite a long time, and it was very profitable for everyone concerned. And then what we saw kind of the next writing on the wall. The next writing on the wall was the fact that Fujitsu wanting to uh, get a piece of the mainframe business because Fujitsu makes mainframes in the UK. They ended up buying ICL.
Got it.
So it was an ICL thing. So we had a relationship with all the people in ICL that were part of this point of sale division. So and we still actually today have contacts in there. And what we saw was that Fujitsu, they ended up um, um, they ended up saying, "Hey, why are we using this company in Monterey to build these point of sale terminals, even though they're built in Japan, but it's not built by Fujitsu, when we have a line of point of sale terminals to be able to do that?" So we kind of both my dad and I had this thing. We need to think about where we're going here because while it's good right now and we're established with this business relationship, kind of see the writing on the wall that this is going to change. So what we ended up doing is we ended up designing a PC based point of sale terminal. Okay. So that PC based, so we use standard peripherals, we use standard PC architecture. We had a
Right.
keyboard that was an AT compatible
Hmm.
keyboard that we had. We had a display that ran off an RS-232 port, a printer interface that comes off the parallel port.
Right.
And of course, we adjusted that by adding power to the cable, which made it a little bit unique and at that time proprietary. And back in those days, proprietary was okay. And later on, I'll explain that the standard changed, but we ended up moving those products, and we went through, and we were okay successful with it to be honest. So it wasn't really super successful, but it was okay. Um, Fujitsu, now in control of that, came to us one day, guys, we're cutting off orders. We're not ordering for you anymore. So we had we'll just say a restructuring at that particular time. We went down from over 100 people down to about 15 or 16 people because all of a sudden our business disappeared. So we started saying, okay, what are we going to do now?
Yep.
This is where I started to come into the pushing of the agenda for the business of where we're going. And my dad he's a great partner. He passed away 15, 18 years ago, but a great mentor. And I almost get teared up thinking about the relationship that we had because I was lucky to have somebody who I was able to look up to and kind of help me along with business in that time.
Hmm.
But what we looked at is what level of expertise do we have that we could apply going forward for a new product line for CyberData. These are one of the next aha moments here.
Hmm.
And that aha moment was the fact that, and I mentioned earlier, these point of sale terminals have proprietary interfaces associated with them. If you were an IBM or you were an NCR or you were a Siemens Nixdorf or you were a Fujitsu, your connections to these peripherals that you had all became very proprietary to you,
Hmm.
not only protocol wise, but electrically they had. And everybody had their different scheme that they had, optically coupled, 485, all these different kinds of interfaces that were out there. And so I was approached by a company, Seiko Epson. And Seiko Epson was a company that manufactured, I'm sure we heard of the watches and they're a
Sure.
wide technology company,
Hmm.
but they had a division in Matsumoto, Japan, that manufactured point of sale printers. Okay, these are the little printers that they had. And the first ones that came out were dot matrix, right? They had the
Yeah.
hammers that fired, click, 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 click there. And then they were one of the first people to come up with, we'll call it a high-speed thermal printer, right? So the thermal head activating paper, basically burning a dot. It's all sort of dot matrix, but on the small scale,
Yep.
burning the dot on the paper, and then be able to produce these receipts. So there was a big opportunity for a company to be able to provide replacement printers using Epson's new technology printers, but they had RS-232 in parallel. Okay, they
Mm.
didn't have anything that would connect into these other types of proprietary interfaces. Well, coincidentally enough, during the times that we were doing the point of sale development for our own company, I specialized, and one of my things was that interface. And we knew that if we needed to connect a scanner or a printer or a scale or something to our point of sale terminal, we had to devise an interface that allow us to do that. And once again, it was a low level protocol at the low level perspective, but also was an electrical standard that and different power that came about. So I made a
Yeah.
proposal to these guys at Epson. I said, hey, you know what? I will take and I'll make you a little module, a little microcontroller module that will have a connector that's the same connector that IBM uses for their printer, their dot matrix printer. And I'll make that Epson printer, this high-speed thermal printer, electrically and software look like it's an old IBM point of sale printer. And so we built that and we rolled out tens of thousands of those things. And this is a little, we called it the Connect It module. And it fit in the back of the printer and it was seamless. And so we sold that to Walmart. We sold that to, at the time, Sears there. We sold it to a number of huge people and it was a great business. Dave,
Was
you had a
that,
question?
yeah, for our audience, again, so you had this realization and you shifted gears, and but obviously every major shift you go through has risk. So would you say that at least at that time frame was that the biggest bet that CyberData made when you had to transition and then also to make this adapter? Like, was that the gamble, if you will?
I would say
I
that
mean,
would
how
be
did
the
you know it was the
gamble.
right move?
Well, you never know it's the right move. Okay,
Hmm.
you have to use intuition and guts and be able to
Yep.
see things in the future. And do you hit it right every time? No, of course you don't. Okay,
Right.
but you got to make the move and you got to see it
Hmm.
because you know where the trend is going. And it's whether it's today or yesterday, you kind of see what's happening. You kind of just like we were talking about AI earlier. Okay,
Hmm.
it's coming.
Yep.
Okay, I'm not
Right.
going to argue whether it's coming or not. It is.
Right.
And
Right.
you've got to be able to make the move. So is it a gamble that it will take over the world and take you out of a job? Yeah, it's a gamble. Okay, but the if you don't, you're going to be left behind. And that moment right there was,
Yeah.
hey, we could take our manufacturing expertise, we
Hmm.
can develop a code at the low level firmware level on these microcontrollers. Okay,
Yep.
now we're talking about Excel applications and these kind of things. We're talking about things that run on a very, very small footprint to be able to
Hmm.
satisfy these market requirements. Well, we ended up building a whole ton of these interfaces. We shipped over 1 million of these
Wow.
interfaces to Epson. Now, it just wasn't an IBM interface. It was an NCR interface. It was a Siemens interface. It was a
Sure.
Fujitsu interface. It was ones where they wanted to be able to play back the journal information. So we had a switch that we put in the front of the printer where you could, if you printed something and you wanted to see that transaction again, you could flip the switch and it would reprint that previous transaction there in order of first in, last out.
Right.
Yeah, first in, last out. And then you're able to get that information. We sold all those to Sears, and Sears had them in their machine. And they Sears was very unique in the fact that they ended up building their own point of sale terminal. They ended up building using a PC based platform from a company called CompuAdd. And CompuAdd, if you remember, it was before Dell. They were the guys that were out there selling these PCs, and they built this platform. And of course, there's
Hmm.
specialty boards in there that they had, point of sale boards, more memory, specialty interfaces, these kind of things. We didn't do that board. But we ended up doing the printer interface that allowed them to swap out their old IBM printer for the higher speed Epson printer there.
Right.
So
Hmm.
we were very successful. So we became the experts in the industry for connecting up legacy type devices to newer platforms. So we're the connectivity guys. That was one of our sort of things that we
Okay.
did, and we did this for other companies, and that was very successful there in that business, and we had a good growth spurt based on that. So once again, as time went on. We built these things, and we had a great relationship with Seiko Epson. The mentality of it wasn't made here started to come out with the guys in Japan, where they said, well, why is this little company in Monterey build, see a pattern here? Why is this little company in Monterey building these things for us? We can do that ourselves. And once again, I saw the handwriting on the wall on that, but I also saw something else. I also saw that printed hard receipts for printers was going to go away. And I saw that, through the early Apple stores that were coming out, where they say, would you like an email receipt? Would you like a receipt emailed to you
Yes.
rather than
Yes.
printing out a piece of paper, right? And I said, you know what, that's what's going to be there in the future. They're not going to have receipts. They're going to have printers to print stuff, and you can get a receipt in some applications, some places, but a lot of times and I'm sure we do the same thing. Do you want a receipt? No, I don't want a receipt. Okay, because you click it on your watch and the transaction's done, and you can go back and audit it later through your credit card company or
Right.
through the other transactions. You can get that information that's available. So I saw that. So I said, okay, we've got a great manufacturing system. We're building tens of thousands of these modules. What are we going to do going forward? Because that was the next aha moment that I had, Dave, where I looked at where the trend was of business was going, and I said, we need to get into something else. Now,
All right.
great part is that we had, a manufacturing capability. We had people that could write software. We had, a business that was running and producing revenue and income. What could we get into that would allow us to utilize those same resources that we have internally and be able to migrate into a different market, as this other market I foresaw, which was a correct assumption, going down. At one particular point, 85% of our business was with one customer. Okay, the Seiko
Oh
Epson
yeah.
customer. It was great. Okay, but it's like if you're a defense
A
contractor
lot
in
of
the United
risk.
States government, a lot of risks in there to be able to do it. It's profitable, but where are you going to be if all of a sudden the budget gets cut and they're not doing that? By the way,
Right.
I should be talking about my migration to cruise missiles right now, because that's where the money is. But but
No
that's
kidding.
another podcast. Um, so I had the opportunity at that particular point, because we're flush with cash. I had good resources available to me. What do we want to do? And so I started looking around at stuff, and I was playing with. I mentioned I'm a skier. I was thinking about maybe some sort of two-way helmet communications, or maybe something that I could build. And looked at the market and said, okay, well, that'd be fun for Phil to do, but maybe there would be a huge scalable volume to be able to do that. Finally ended up, this is sort of right after the dot-com era that came in. And one of the benefits of the dot-com is the fact that the infrastructure from a communications perspective immensely built a
Mhm.
huge global crossing, fiber networks, all these kind of things. And they basically overbuilt the network before the business was actually there to do that. But that, in a sense, that's a good thing. And so I looked at, what could we build in that telecommunications space? Where could we make money? So I said, okay, well, first thing, we're we're a manufacturer. Let's make a phone. And I said, to be honest with you, phones were at a premium back then. You could buy a Cisco IP phone or a Avaya IP phone. They're thousands of dollars
Mhm.
to at least $1,000 to be able to buy those. I said, I know the way the market's going to be. Eventually, these are going to be $50 commodity items. I don't
Yes.
want to get it. I don't want to be the low cost provider of any product. And if I'm seeing that trend, I want to get out of it, because I just can't do it. The old adage is, remember, it's lose money on every product, but make it up in volume, right? Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Didn't want to be in that space. So I looked at making a phone. No, I don't want to do that. I can make a PBX. That's when Asterisk was first coming out, and open source stuff. And we're an open source shop right now, Linux based shop. I could do that. Well, once again, I looked at it saying, hey, you know, maybe this isn't the best decision to do that, because once again, it's going to be a features and functions race to the bottom on
Mhm.
that. You're gonna be successful for a bit, but that's not going to give you any long-term viability as far as being able to produce a product. And you're not going to be a Net Sapiens. You're not going to be a Cisco. You're going to sit in the mid pack somewhere, and it's going to be a struggle. So anyway, push that off the side there. And then I happened to one day, and I'll be honest with you guys, I happened to one day picking up the Viking catalog. And Viking at the time was the red and green wire analog go-to place for stuff, for
Yep.
for for speakers, for intercoms, for buzzers, for all the stuff. And you go, you know what? I could make IP versions of all these things. I can go ahead and I can generate a whole product line based on just copying not the product, but copying the function of out of this catalog here. So we ended up developing two products initially, an outdoor intercom, which we still produce, by the way. This is almost the exact same model. It's been updated with new processors, but the same basic thing. And then an IP speaker. And we took those to the first trade show, and that's back when IT Expo in Florida used to be a communications show, not
Uh-huh.
a technology show. I mean, it was all
And it,
about it was not specifically as refined as it
yes.
is today. And I
And
remember
that
sitting.
I
Go
have
ahead,
to
please.
stop you for just a second and say
Sure.
thank you, because I was installing Epigees, Allworks, and versions of Asterisk at that time. And I went to the very second IT Expo after they started, and I started buying your products over Viking
Oh, nice, nice, nice.
because I needed them to be IP. I didn't want to convert them every time
Right,
with
right,
a gateway. It was
right.
more overhead for me.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and but I remember this because I always tell the story that we were sitting there with one of my sales guys, and people would come up to me and they say, hey, what do you got here? And I never heard of you guys. Well, we make a VoIP intercom that's PoE powered that hooks up to your digital phone system. Why do I need that? Okay, and I don't get it. And this is where the epiphany came in at that time. This was like 18, 19 years ago. The epiphany was the fact that these people that were at that show were facilities people. They were people that understood how to hook up wires. They understand how to hook up amplifiers. They understand how to do these things, but in the analog world. The big transition that happened in the industry was the migration of products for communication being moved from the facilities and analog world over to the IT department,
mhm.
right? And the IT department, they've always been managing like the shared printers, the PCs that are there, the connections that they had. It wasn't until Cisco and Avaya started pushing the agenda of a VoIP phone system on top of the network that they provided. And that's really where
Hmm.
they remember Cisco made all their money on their switches. Okay.
Right.
They didn't make money on their phone stuff. They wanted to sell switch infrastructure. So ancillary to their network infrastructure, they started building these little peripherals that connected up to there and being able to manage the phones from that. Now, who took the responsibility for those phones? It migrated from the facilities guy to
Absolutely.
the IT
To the
department.
to the
Right.
And
IT
that was
department.
the big change in the marketplace. That was the where the vision came out that this is where things are going to go to. And
Phil,
and go ahead.
Phil, question for you. Would you say that you were fleeting edge in the beginning, early to the market, or do you feel like you were able to ride that just right? I mean, because think about it, CyberData starts as a software company in its infancy, when it first started, but for the most part, your world was hardware or adapters to hardware with Epson, Seiko Epson, and so forth. And then, and we're slowly getting into the IP world here. So we are talking about cloud-based and or certainly network-derived, communications. Um, where do you think you guys were at on that scale? Like, do you feel that was, were you there at the right time? Were you a little early to the market, or, what did you see in the
I
beginning?
think yeah, great question. I think that we were right at the right time. I think that you always go back and say, well, should I have done this product or shouldn't I have done this product?
Right.
And the problem that we had was the fact that the existing way that you sell product through the channel has migrated and changed.
Hmm.
And the traditional paths are going through a distributor, reseller, end user. I mean, that's just,
Hmm.
standard. Well, it was also back in the day where the distributors stocked items. They bought the items and they stocked them, and that's why
Yes.
you use a distributor.
Right.
Nowadays they're basically, they're just box pushers, okay? And
Right.
they take an order and uh, you know another story, but we don't want to be the Amazon delivery of, having somebody order the part and we just ship one product out to somebody. I mean, that's not the
Yeah.
way we wanted to do business there.
Right.
And so what we saw was that there was a couple people that were in our industry at the time that were doing similar types of things. And really there was only really one, two if you count this. But the first one was Valcom. So Valcom came up
Sure.
with an
I
IP
remember.
based product,
Mhm.
very
Yep.
proprietary. You had to use a utility to enter it to make any modifications. But once again, they were there. I remember the owner, Jack or John, whoever. For some reason, they always confused me which one they were. Actually, came out and visited me in Monterey. And he was a pilot as well, so he wanted to fly his plane out to Monterey to visit. And I remember sitting there, and I had overlooking the airport, and we're just chatting. And he goes, well, I see, congratulations, you're in the market now with this VoIP market. And he says, there's probably a worldwide need for about 10,000 of these a year. Okay. And so that kind of gives you an idea of whether that was early or not. Obviously, it was super early. And that's what he
Right.
was picturing as far as that goes. And the other competitor that was out there was, and this is where it got a little complicated, was Single Wire, right? Single Wire, mass notification company, the 800-pound gorilla in the industry right now. They basically came from a group of people that were an offshoot of Cisco, who created a company called, and I don't get the exact story, but there's Burby was involved with that. They were a network people that dealt with the Cisco systems, and they ended up building their notification system on top of the Cisco call manager architecture.
Okay.
Um, Single Wire or went ahead and created a specification of how they wanted IP devices to be talked to, and that was a Single Wire standard that they have. And Single Wire contracted with a company called A&D, who are still in business today, and they were basically an engineering firm who now have taken it upon themselves to be a provider of VoIP technology as well.
Mhm.
Um, and they contracted with these guys to do the design and to actually use Atlas, now Mitel, or not Mitel, but Mitech, to be able to sell these into the Cisco market world, right? So they had a good relationship for a long time. A&D built these boards. Well, they ended up being some sort of kerfluffle between the owner of Atlas and the owners of A&D. And Atlas came to CyberData, and we ended up for years building the controllers for the Atlas products. And so we did that. So CyberData technology under the hood that we ended up
Right.
doing that. So that's part of our OEM business. And that was a good piece of business. Then once again, I'm jumping a little forward, but I'm going to go back again. They ended up internally deciding that they wanted to be able to build their own products rather than some small company in Monterey. Okay, once again, a pattern here. Okay, once they get successful, right? They want to do themselves, and totally
Uh-huh.
understand that. I mean,
Yeah.
So
I
they're
don't.
using, so they keep using your company though, these organizations as the proof of concept
Yeah, in a sense, yeah,
in a
in a sense,
sense.
yeah, in a sense, and we had some good production out of there. So more of just a proof
Sure.
of concept, and we actually went into
Right.
manufacturing and
Right.
everybody made some money on the whole deal. So
Right.
it was a collaborative, mutually beneficial relationship, right? Obviously on
Right. Right.
all these endeavors, and so once again back to who was the competition back in those days. Those two, so CyberData, Valcom, and A&D slash Atlas was the providers of this technology to Single Wire, or sorry, A&D and Atlas were the providers of single wire interface. We took the
Right.
more of the open systems approach and made it SIP compliant, because the SIP standard was this great standard that allowed you to interrupt and have
Right.
connectivity to a wide variety of platforms.
Hmm.
Most of the major manufacturers supported that. Some
Yep.
companies like Cisco had their own proprietary interface called Skinny,
Right.
which they still use today, which they drove their phones. Now, they, through pressure, were able to support SIP as a
Yes.
load on their peripherals, on their phones, but also they're able to support third-party devices, aka CyberData devices, running under that sort of standard SIP protocol. Now, SingleWire, Cisco, they all charge a license fee to be able to do that. So if you wanted
Right.
to be able to connect up to their system, they made sure that you paid for it to be able to do that. Good
Sure.
business part on them, but that has changed quite a bit. But the SIP compliance allowed us connection to literally almost anybody that had a SIP compliant device,
Right.
a SIP compliant server. Now, the SIP standard, um, kind of a little bit loosey goosey, right? It wasn't this fully defined RFC that defined every bit, every byte. It kind of said, okay, here you need to present this data, but it didn't give you the syntax that maybe this needs to be ahead of this, behind this, and so everybody interpreted it slightly different. And CyberData's secret sauce over the years has been be able to identifying those differences and having exceptions rules in our standard architecture that we have as far as the SIP
Nice.
compliance. And if you look at our compatibility, our interop board, you'll see that we're pretty much compatible with most everybody. Do we still end up having some interop issues every once in a while? Yes, but few and far between because they're very
You're
simple
agnostic.
devices. Yeah. We're pretty much agnostic on that part. But and
Huge.
with the development team that we have, we're able to make changes and functions that on a very quick basis to satisfy requirements. And probably one of the big issues in that is that XYZ company decides to make a change in their structure, and they don't tell us about it because they're just mean and they just don't let us know. Okay.
Right.
And the next thing you know, we get phone calls from customers saying, hey, this doesn't work anymore. Okay, what changed? Well, we just got a new version of Call Manager. Oh, okay. Well,
Right.
maybe that has something to do with it. Okay.
Right.
But anyway, we try to emphasize the company this from a support perspective that the customer
Right.
we're going to take care. If it's not our problem, I'm not going to push you back to the manufacturer. I'm going to identify it with the tools that we have and be able to point out where the problem is. And then if it's something that we can fix or something that the manufacturer identifies, and it's gone both ways, the PBX provider, then we go ahead and we fix that. So that led to the development of a wide breadth of products that CyberData has, and a lot of these things came through as products that I think the market needs these because but nobody's asking for them, and some of them were winners, some of them weren't. But we kept the development thing going to get the IP going to be able to build these things. And you could look at our
That's
out of our sort of 80-20 rule of products, and 20% are the ones that are successful into the big movers. The 80s they sell, but they're not as important from production perspective as the 20.
that's a great segue, Phil, because you know we've just done we've just gone from what I would call software and analog, digital. We're now talking IP, and for our audience who knows the cyber data story, you know now you have hybrid paging, you have cloud-based control, Terminus, for example. Um, how did your thinking evolve again from this idea of devices, which you have great devices, and I think most people, especially if they're service providers, have used some of your devices. But now you have this whole idea of platform and control first instead of device first, right? Terminus is about controlling the IP endpoints, for example. Can you speak a little bit about again that evolution of thinking? Like it sounds
Sure,
like
yeah,
every X amount of years you go through an
and
evolution.
this was another aha moment. Okay, this is and aha moments don't happen in the middle of the night. Sometimes they do, but they mostly are you build up information and you kind of start making an assessment of where you see things are going, and you try to adjust before they get out of control. You try to control the situation rather than let the situation control you. That's in life.
Right.
That's important in general.
Hmm?
Okay, so in this particular case, but I did want to make just a quick digression to a point. We were talking
Please,
about
please.
distribution.
Yes.
And I think it was important when we first started out to understand how this market works. And for any new product coming into the marketplace, going through the traditional channel of distributor, reseller, end user, that you have a problem where if you go to to a distributor and you say, carry my products, the first thing that they do is they come back and they say, we don't have any need for it.
Right.
Why? Because people aren't asking for it. Well, people aren't asking for it because it's not out there. What comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? And this really frustrating thing. So we'll take Ingram Micro, for example. We had a relationship with Ingram Micro because we
Mhm.
sold products through them for a point of sale portion of our products. So we had an in, we had someone we could call. So the
Right.
first VoIP products that we presented to the Ingram price list were actually under the point of sale category. Okay, because they
Oh,
didn't have a category for VoIP,
communications. Right. For voice.
communications, right?
Wow.
And
Okay.
so it took us several years of successes before they ended up moving us into telecommunications and then notification and these kind of things and their divisions. But you don't know how to get into a new market and how to distribute that product if that product it hasn't had a need or somebody's asking about it. Now, what we do when we talk to somebody and they say, well, we want to use this distributor, I said, well, we've contacted the distributors, they're not interested in stuff. You got to tell the distributor that you want the CyberData products. And as soon as you do that, then they're gonna pick up the phone and call you and to put you in a better position rather than begging for them to sell your stuff. I think
So the
this is
service provider is actually now the one that can help drive the
right,
availability of the
Mhm.
services, the
right,
solutions, the products in this
right.
case. But they've got to provide that feedback loop back to whoever their distributor of choice is.
And here's the real, once again, another podcast question. The current channels that were used for selling products the right channel to go, right? And if I would have known today what I know, if I would have known yesterday what I've known today, I would question whether or not going through the distribution channel is really the right answer for a lot of these things. It may be better to go through right to the resellers. Or in some cases, right to the end user to be able to sell those things because of the fact that you're at the mercy of the distribution channel who don't stock. Okay, they
Right.
only they only want to bring products on that have a need, but you can't really get that need. It's on you to drive
Uh-huh.
that need back to the distributor
Right.
so that they'll do it. Who should you be marketing to? Once again, we're too late. I have a great relationship with my distributors. I'm not going to change that right now. But it's something to think about with a new product direction that we would have, whether or not and we'll talk about that in a second, whether or not that's the right idea to try to sell that particular application through the channel, or as opposed to then having a direct sales team to be able to go out and do that.
So you
Right.
might you might say that that is a strategic mistake by all parties involved to some degree, right? It could be a mistake with with distribution and the fact that they've changed the way they bring a product to the market. It might be even uh, the service provider who's buying that product. Uh, you know, they need to almost demand those products. They're I mean they're the ones that are talking to the end user. I mean, it's difficult to expect an end user. Now, there's certainly a lot more availability of data and information, Phil. So I think you certainly could see end users going on the internet, using their AI to find a product or service. But it would be a much nicer world if the service providers had those available to them. Make
I
makes
think
it makes it easier.
I think that the end user is always the goal, right? Because they're the guys that sign the
Yes.
Right.
checks and order the
Yeah.
products, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
So our job as pontificators of our products is to
Yeah.
educate the marketplace as opposed to trying to sell to the marketplace. and we
Right.
need to be able to educate what they need and what the types of products that they need that they don't know, and become a source of that information. And then by default, you're going to be the target of those products as they sell for the different users. So and you excuse me, end users have two different kind of categories. There are the ones that want one telephone number that they can
Right.
call to solve their
Yep.
problem. And that's what
Yes.
Cisco and IBM and
Mhm.
Avaya and all those guys, that's where they made their money, because the IT department guy goes, IBM, I got a problem. Okay.
Right.
And they would have an account manager who would go in there and help them solve the problem and do that. But from a resource perspective, I think that's kind of getting a little few and far between right now, being able to have a
Right.
single phone call. But that's what they want. Then there's the techie type guys, right? These are the guys that are doing the home brews. In the point of sale world, we had companies like Sears, for example. They wrote their own software. They had their own service organization. They had their own support staff that dealt with stuff. They had a bunch of smart guys in there that said, "Hey, we want to get this done. We're going to investigate with our internal resources how to do that." Home Depot is another example. One of our customers. They do stuff internally,
Right.
and for us, it's a better customer to deal with than
Right.
going through multiple levels of what's a telephone game where this guy said that, this guy said that. Now I'm trying to make a decision what's best for them, but I've got
Right.
third-hand information of what they really need. I know
Right.
best when I actually talk to you, the end user customer, what you really need. And a lot of times it's different. Okay?
Right.
Definitely no
It's
whisper down the alley. Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, it's totally different, right? So
Right.
Uh-huh.
Right.
so so I wanted to bring that up from the perspective of how the market has changed, and
Right.
how these commodity items are now being sold into the marketplace, and how difficult it is to go through the channel to be able to make yourself be a differentiator in the industry, to be able to push your message to the end user, to the people, to the resellers, that this is how you're different. Now, with a great company that we're dealing with called Green Star, I don't know if you've heard of them before, but they're doing a great job of helping navigate that through social media, through different types of avenues, and the use of AI, obviously, to be able to gather information
Mm-hmm.
and be able to do it. Helps define that. Used to back in the day, used to send out letters, right? US
Yeah.
US mail,
Direct mail.
direct
Right.
mail.
Absolutely.
You'd
Sure.
you'd send out 1 million of them, and
Yep.
if you got 2 or 3%, you're doing good. Okay.
Right.
Now
Right.
that's moved into, we've got a database of 25,000 potential VoIP customers. We send it out. We're kind of getting the
Right.
same kind of percentage coming back, maybe a little bit better, of people
Right.
that are responding, going back to our web pages. But we're able to monitor and manage that
Right.
Right. Right.
there. But nothing is as good as picking up the phone and calling somebody and having a conversation. And
Absolutely.
and that I'm sorry, that's just how it works. Dialing for dollars,
Yep.
and from a sales perspective. Anyway, I just want to talk about that channel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fast
I
forward
have a
to
quick question
sure.
that is an issue in the distribution world, right? Because me myself buying from distribution for years. In fact, I kind of chuckled when you said I had, when you first got with Ingram Micro, I had to look under POS systems to buy your devices.
Right.
I remember that. And then I think CTD picked you up and some stuff like that. But um, how do you deal with I guess you call it the gray market, right? Because you don't want to support that per se, have people come direct to you. So for instance, like now I can go on Amazon and I can buy a Yealink phone. Well, it's not going to be supported by anybody, but I can buy it there, right? As an end user.
I
So did you
I
guys come across that a
yeah,
bit, and
I
how
have
did you deal with that?
I have a little bit of a different philosophy on that,
Okay.
because the traditional distribution channel network that you have frowns on the gray market that you have.
Right.
If somebody's buying it from Amazon, to me, somebody bought it from us already, right?
Gotcha.
They just don't find it in a warehouse somewhere. It was a purchase somewhere, whether it's coming from a
Right.
distributor,
Unless it fell
whether it's
off a
coming
truck.
from, it fell off a truck or whatever. Highly unlikely. But the bottom line is, I made my money from that sale already, so I'm going to support that product regardless. We have a
Good. Good.
policy.
Yeah, that's great.
We have
Yeah,
a
that's not the
policy.
norm.
Well, we have a policy in place that says no, we don't do that. But
Hmm.
9 times out of 10, I'll go ahead and I'll you know, because that filters its way up to me, and I make a decision based on things. And it's, you know, Joe bought one of these things for his church off Amazon, and it's not working. You know, do we support this? Yeah, we'll support it. Okay, yeah, well, because we're trying to take care of the customer. I mean, that's super important
Yeah.
to be a differentiator in the market. You just want to say, I'm sorry, you're screwed. You know what? I'm not going to take care of you. Now, do we get into exceptions? Well, I bought this unit, but a forklift ran over it. Do you support it? No, I'm sorry,
Oh,
I don't.
sure.
Okay, okay, I just don't. Okay,
Right.
and we have to make those hard decisions. However, then it becomes the onus of the sales staff to sell them something different and go
Uh-huh.
through the channel to be able to be able to buy it. You know, and I just don't see protecting the channel when they're not really protecting us is really that important in our world that we have. Now, I just say that unofficially. Of course, everybody in the world's seen this podcast and they know how I feel. But you know, the bottom line is that the most important person that you need to impress is the person actually using that product. And
100%. Yes.
and that's the most important part. So we'll go out of our
Cool.
way to make that happen.
Well, thanks.
So,
Uh,
um, so now, Dave, back to your original question before I jump back into the sales and marketing or the distribution channel. Um, we're at another epiphany here in the marketplace from a cyber data perspective. We have always been a pieces and parts provider.
Right.
We are a cog on somebody else's solution, wheel of solution.
mhm,
There are competitors out there that are in the marketplace that are selling products that are competitive with ours. Function, cost. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And we first started, there was, you know, a couple of us, but you know, it's changed. And there are Chinese companies that are if you're making a $50 phone, you can make a $50 IP speaker. Okay.
yeah.
Let's be clear. I mean, there's really not that much to it now these days. There's nothing really proprietary. Now, what differentiates yourself in the marketplace is what I mentioned earlier: the support, the secret sauce that you have that makes it work. You know, the local content if that's important for you. You know,
Yeah.
those are all things. Those are all things that we can do to satisfy the market. But what we're seeing is while the volume of sales overall in the industry has growing and it will continue
Yes.
to grow. And we see different Gartner reports. You know,
Hmm.
telecommunications, it's growing. It's not gonna go down, at least in the, excuse me, in the near future. But we're seeing
Right.
is because of the increased competition, that market's being diluted. And we're seeing
Right.
our sales be affected by, you know, other people in the marketplace that are basically, you know, maybe have a better sales team or be at the right place, wrong, right time. Who knows, whatever it is. They're all kind of equally compatible from a pricing and from a function perspective, to be honest with you. So what do we do? What does CyberData do? What does Phil Lembo do at this particular point? Or what did I recognize like a year ago that we need to be able to do? And what
Yeah.
we need to be able to do is we need to be price competitive for sure. We need to make sure I don't want to lose money, like I said earlier, on products just to keep market share.
mhm,
We need to be able to take what we have, our existing technology, and we have great technology, we have great products, super reliable. We increased our warranty to 5 years. Okay, we have a 5 year warranty. I don't think anybody in the market has that. And the reason we did that, not just because of some fly by night decision, but we look at our statistics of returns, and it's like, you know, I had the whole analysis done, and it's like, this is a minimal risk. Okay,
Right.
because I mean, we're not going to be out on the hook for things failing after 5 years. We got intercoms and speakers that have been running for 10, 12 years now. Okay,
Right.
that don't have any issues. So I'm not worried about that.
Yep.
What's important now is how do we grow the business? How do we expand into other areas that aren't so pieces and parts commodity driven?
hmm
Well, these guys' prices are $29.95 and yours $39.99. Okay, well, you need to do something. I don't want to do that. Okay,
Right.
so what can we do? We need to be able to start providing solutions to the marketplace. And the solutions are basically taking our existing products that we have and packaging those things up into verticals that effectively allow those markets to utilize us as a total solution. that's what I mentioned earlier about maybe I want to start selling this direct to some of these people, where I take my, maybe I have my standard products through the distribution channel, and then maybe I take my cloud-based notification management system, and I start
Right.
going out with a direct sales team to be able to
For
sell those
verticals.
to those verticals. We picked
Right.
4 verticals right now. Education, which is obviously a hot button for everybody,
Sure.
warehouses, manufacturing, and
Hmm.
retail only because we have a lot of
Sure.
familiarity in that industry. And so there are many other ones. There's healthcare, there's
Mhm.
other types of things that we can do, but we can't do everything to everybody, so we had to kind of
Right.
pick what these are. And through Green Star's help, we've been able
Mhm.
to focus into those marketplaces and be able to get our name out there. But the problem is that in those, like, I'll give an example. I subscribe to Manufacturing Today, which is
Mhm.
a monthly magazine, or maybe it's a weekly magazine that comes in that talks about this. And they say, well, Samsung is building a new plant in Michigan, and
Right.
it's going to be 5 million square feet, and it's going to be building to be completed in 2027, and it's going to hire 1,000 people. Everybody's all hyped on people in the United States building things here in the United States, right? That's the whole tariff thing, that's a whole other conversation, the tariff thing. But
Sure.
we how do we get into that business? How do we sell through solutions like that, which is our whole package?
Right.
And it's not only speakers and these kind of things, but it's other types of IoT devices that are involved with that whole package. And this is where the Terminus system comes into play. Because
Okay.
with that, I'm able to monitor at any one location throughout the country. I'm not trying to do a sales job on this, but it's the concept that we're trying to
Yeah.
pitch here, is that
Yeah.
we can go ahead and have one portal where the IT department, who has maybe 500 retail stores, can
Right.
access at one time all the different peripherals and facilities that they have. Now, maybe it's a speaker for doing a notification. Maybe it's a strobe, or maybe it's a gunshot detector. Maybe it's a temperature monitor. Maybe it's
Right.
something in there that has yet to be built, or interface to, that allow us to do that. And then back to
Right.
the very, very original part of this conversation, SaaS as a business methodology, we're
Yep.
looking at, hey, sell the peripherals. We make money on hardware now. We love making hardware. I love making hardware. I mean, that's my life. Okay, I've got thousands of, my notebook is full of ideas that have yet to be built. It's a matter of having people talk into building it for me, because I have to justify that there's a market for it, but it doesn't
Right.
exist. So how do I justify there's a market? Okay, so so building that and being able to provide that to the marketplace, that's where the epiphany that we're at, the gating moment that we're at right now, trying to do that. I could stay in the pieces and parts business, but what I see in the future is it's going to be a declining market. And
Right.
not because they're declining sales of the overall industry, okay, but because of the fact that there's more competition coming in that makes it more difficult.
Well, and
Sure.
a lot of what you're talking about when you're in teccom is notorious for a race to the bottom, right? Commoditization and driving pricing down. So it's not just even on the hardware side; it's even on the service side, on the internet bandwidth side. We had mentioned something early on in this conversation, so I'm going to ask you, where do you see AI entering the conversation? Where do you see intelligent automation and AI impacting your devices, your Terminus product, you know, paging? Like, where, yeah, even if you don't have an answer specifically yet, or maybe you don't want to share everything, at least give me a little bit of an insight as to
Sure,
what you see AI doing
sure.
for cyber data in the next year or two. And is that what you're excited about, or is there something else you're excited about that's coming in the next 12 or 24 months?
I think I think I think I think AI, and we talked about this earlier, AI is here.
Mhm.
It's evolving, it's getting better. But it's getting better in different categories. From an
Mhm.
analytical perspective, you have internal operations that you can save money on and become more efficient for your people. Number one, what does that do? That increases your profitability because each person becomes more efficient. You don't need to hire more people to do that work. Now, I don't want to say this, but you might be able to relieve people of their positions because AI is going to be able to help you. Okay, we're not in that position yet, but we're implementing AI from a support perspective. My support guys currently use Notebook LM tied to all of our modules. So if somebody calls in, they got a problem, rather than go through 1,000 PDF files, they just basically open up their Notebook LM thing that I set up for them. That they
Love that.
basically can get that answer, and it works really well. Okay, so internally, I mentioned about going to our ERP system, being able to query that information. I'm able to do something that would take a bandwidth from somebody to be able to take care of that. So that's one portion of it, internal operations. So that's going to happen. That's happening right now.
Yeah.
From a development perspective,
right,
it's been a game changer. And it's been a game changer in two different areas. For example, I have an industrial designer, Andrew, who's been with me for years and years. Fantastic designer. He runs SolidWorks. He's able to do stuff that's just super incredible in a super amount of time. To be honest with you, we're working on a new product right now. It needed a new label on the front, and everybody was chiming in. Of course, too many cooks trying to make a decision on what the aesthetics of that. So while they're all sitting there arguing about whether we should have this font or that font or this color or that font, I go into Gemini, and I go using Nano Banana, and I say, take this picture. I took it right off our website, modify it to show it what it looks like, what I think it should look like. And I just presented it in our Teams call. And I go, hey, look, check your chat line, and there it is. Okay, I mean, that would take days of being able to do that, right? So from a development perspective, that's a whole ballpark. Now, Andrew still needs to create the drawing today, okay?
Sure.
But eventually it's going to be able to generate CAD drawings and these things. It's just a natural process to be able to do it. There's always an artistic point you mentioned about the people input, how much of a person is going to be part of that.
Yeah, human plus AI, right? The
human plus
collaborative approach.
AI,
yes,
collaborative approach. And is AI going to be able to figure out what the next product is? Say, what's your next product that I need in the marketplace to be successful? Actually, I haven't really done that, but I don't think it's going to come up and tell me what the thing. So you got to have a person in there to think about that, right? You got to have a person in there to do that. So that part, sales and marketing research, generation of marketing and social media collateral, fantastic.
Yep.
Business operations, that's where it's going to have. Engineering wise, I ended up there's a product that we're trying to build, and I said, okay, this is what I want to do. This is the inputs and outputs that I want to do. What do you recommend? And I did this with Claude. I try to have Claude for all the technical stuff, and then all the more esoteric stuff I use ChatGPT, and then Gemini. And I've kind of given up on Copilot because it's kind of like, okay, it doesn't really do much for me. Although occasionally I use it, but with Claude, I said, okay, give me an idea of that goes in, goes out. What processor would you recommend? This is the function I want to do it, and it's a development cycle to be able to ask a question, refine the question, ask a question, refine the question, ask a question, refine a question, and you can do that and cut your development time dramatically in half. So and I said, give me a design, give me a schematic of what this design looks like. And I got a schematic of the thing. And I threw it over my engineer, Dave, and I said, Dave, take this and let's find a development kit that does this, but I know this will work, and it has thought through the process. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so that's the development side, and I'm not even talking about doing any kind of coding. My guys that are coders, I got about 8 guys that do coding. They're old school. They're not old, but they're old school. I'm trying to push this sort of vibe coding concept on them. Well, we can't do that. It doesn't work. There's too many, build routes, all these other type of things that are real complicated to do. It doesn't really, maybe that's true today, but it's going to happen. And it's going to happen. Now, I know that for writing specialty test programs for manufacturing, I got a guy doing vibe coding to write that. It doesn't have to be clean. Doesn't have to be, doesn't all this stuff has to work. Just goes ins and outs, a Python routine to be able to run this. Boom, you're done. And it's done. It would have taken somebody days to write that and test that. You could do it in an afternoon. Okay. So that's helping that process. So I want to mention about the code writing portion of it. So now from a product perspective, what can the products do that's AI? Okay. We know how to get to that product, but what will the products do? And that's the big open question right now is is in our industry, what functions and features are you able to accomplish? Well, one, for example, we have a text to speech conversion. Okay, so
Hmm.
we get a text message coming in from the National Weather Service. We need to turn that into a text. Now you can do that two ways. You can do an edge device that does it, meaning an edge aspect
Right.
that does that conversion, or you can do a cloud-based version of that. In the
Mhm.
terminus world, okay, we can go out to a third-party provider that does that and bring that data in, and then it's ubiquitous as far as the operation. And it's super fast. You say convert this over to voice, and they give you an audio file, and then we can push that down to the product. That's number one.
Right.
Here's the challenging part. I did an experiment where I built an image of a school, dozen classrooms, different doors, different windows, different stuff.
Mhm.
And I went and I used this particular one. I used ChatGPT. I did this several months back. And I go, there's a fire in classroom 20. How do I get people out of there safely? And so I did these scenarios that show AI explaining, looking at and visualize looking at smoke sensor. There's a smoke
Sure.
sensor, there's a fire sensor, there's a camera doing video analytics, there's all these different inputs there. Be able to make a decision to be able to how to safely get those kids out of there with the least amount of potential risk. Never going to eliminate 100% risk, but least
Sure.
amount of risk. Okay.
Right.
I'm telling you, it worked. Okay.
That's
It worked.
awesome.
Now selling that to the marketplace, that's a little challenging because everybody goes, well, what if it makes a mistake? Well, what if the principal picks up the phone and says, everybody go out the south door, okay? But that's where the fire is, okay? They don't know
Right.
about that. And the principal might not even, and by the time they get somebody on the phone that's analyzing this, it may be too late. So you got to be able to have the instantaneous decisions, but there has to be a level of market acceptance that this is going to work
I
and it's an acceptable thing. So
think there's something there with underwriters laboratories too.
yeah, there's probably there's a safety and aspect of
Uh-huh.
that,
Absolute.
and this is
Yeah.
all new bleeding edge areas here
Right.
where I'm not sure where it's going to go, but I do know that it potentially will work, and I do know as a product development perspective going
Yes.
forward for our future notification systems, it's got to be incorporated. If nothing else, it's got to be in there for the market to say, hey, these guys are on top of it and they're utilizing these type of tools. I mean, there's all
Mhm.
sorts of things for on the PBX side right now. You guys are working with that stuff right now. You call analytics, these kind of things that are going
Oh,
on. That AI is
sentiment,
fantastic.
sentiment analysis. Yeah, yes. I mean, AI, you know, um,
AI
chatbots,
IVRs
agentic
is the big
AI.
thing right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. The IVR is
Hmm.
that's a big market, and of course nobody likes to talk to these things. Right now they don't, but if they work and they're
They
effective,
will. Yeah.
they
Right.
will, and then they'll accept it. And I'm sorry, what does it really mean? It really means that somebody's gonna be out of a job that was doing that manually. Okay.
Well, hopefully it's not that they're out of a job. Hopefully that person can be utilized for a higher value function, right? Certainly there's cost efficiencies that we can look at, but I keep telling people, you know, you still need roofers just because there's a nail gun instead of a hammer. You still need, mechanics, even though they have tools that they plug in that give you the diagnostics. You still need people to do certain things, right? AI is a incredible tool. Um, I think there's definitely, yes, there are certainly some job functions that are at risk, but I also think you almost want to get rid of that monotonous, boring work to some degree, right? I mean, I think I think many people would prefer to do the things that they enjoy doing, the things that are maybe a little more challenging. So that at least that's my hope, Phil. I don't know if you agree, but that would,
Yeah, I do, and the trades, if there was a young fellow that's looking for a job for the future, it's got to be a trade, okay?
That's
Because
it.
that's protected.
Absolutely. Yep.
protected from the
Mhm.
guy that fixes your snowmobile. It can't be an AI. I'm sorry. It's got to be somebody who can
No.
turn a wrench, right? I mean that's the
Right.
bottom line,
Right.
or the carpenter to fix the stuff. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
but
Yeah, it's funny,
so
like interesting stuff like that, right? So you said you're into motorcycles as well and
sure,
things like that. So you're not going to replace an experienced mechanic who understands that it goes through a jet at some point in the carburation, whether and those jets have to even be specially tuned or downsized depending on the performance you want to get. So sure, AI can sure guide you through it. So let's say it's a better YouTube if I'm doing a DIY project at home, right? I take a picture of what I'm working on and ChatGPT will tell me how to fix it. Great.
right,
But it's never going to replace that. Wait a minute, there's something off in this. That little
right.
timing's off a little bit, this or that. That's the stuff where like guys like you who tinker and all that and what you're doing with cyber data and anybody who ends up working with their hands and gets that experience, that's a huge difference. Like you said, young people should be looking at that. Get into that and be an expert at whatever it is, whether you're going to carpentry or mechanics or even small engine repair, things
Right.
like that, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, I'll even go a little lower than have to be the expert, because that says that the only way you can survive in an AI world is if you're the best of the best of the best, which I think
Ten
is
ten
a
thousand
race,
hours, right? Right.
which
Yeah,
is a race to
yeah.
the bottom. Here's what I'm going to say. Um, you have to be passionate about what you do,
Yeah, yeah.
because there are only so many Michael Jordans in the NBA, and there are
Hmm.
only so many LeBron James, and there are only so many in every industry. The top of the top, and that doesn't leave a whole lot of jobs left for everybody else if that's
Right.
how we look at it. I don't think that's. I think passion will be the winner here.
So, mhm.
So Phil,
Yes.
when you look back at your journey, this was quite a journey on this podcast today.
Yeah.
Not as a president, but simply as Phil. What are you most proud of, and what would you tell your younger self if you were just getting started today?
First thing I tell myself as I was younger, if I started a company brand new, take more money out of the company as you're going along. Okay, that's the first thing I would say, because my old man said that on his last days, he goes, I love what I did. I love what I did. We made a lot of money. I should have taken more out. Okay, that's number one. Okay, because that's
Okay.
the benefit of ownership. Okay, is that you can do that. But regardless, you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't be there unless you had a passion for what you're doing. And
Yep.
I think what both you guys are saying is that you got to have a passion for what you're doing. You got to have an
Hmm.
excitement, and
Yep.
things that you like to do, you'll do them, right? Things that you don't like to
Right.
do, you put them off, right?
Yep.
So why focus on something you don't want to do? Sometimes you have to, but why focus on that as your life goal going forward if you're really not going to be happy with at the end of the day? And I've led a good life. It's not over yet by any means. I don't want to put that as like a stamp on it.
Right.
And I look forward to the future of more development. This whole AI thing excites me right now.
Yeah.
I study it all the time, and I'm trying to do vibe coding myself, right? I got an old
Yeah.
website.
Yeah.
And I downloaded the source for that website. It's an old
Hmm.
WordPress thing, and I'm using Claude in the environment to basically redo that website. I'm just going to do it myself. I'm not asking anybody
Yeah.
for any help. I'm just
Right.
going to see if I can do it. I got it running locally, so it doesn't affect what's on the web. But
Right.
we'll see. Now, did I know anything about that? Yeah, I've done programming before at a
Sure.
low microcontroller level, because I've got some experience in that. But I've never really tried to done any kind of applications or stuff like that. But if I can do it, and I think anybody can do it, and that's where I think the future is going to be. Don't. What's an old saying? Where you're listening to things. This is what you
Yep.
don't want to do. You don't want to close that door and not listen to things, because you shut too many things off. And
Right.
I think it's really important.
That is solid advice, Phil.
That sure is.
I've got one final question for you. And I've asked every one of our podcast guests, and I think I'm going to continue to ask this question because I've been getting some great answers. So, what is one thing in this incredible ecosystem that we're in that we're not talking about that perhaps we should be?
in the ecosystem that we are in, as far as
Yeah,
our life is concerned, or just in the
no,
world
like
in general, the
no, the
technical,
TechCom ecosystem.
what we should be focusing on.
Well, so basically, what I'm asking you is, we everyone's talking about AI, everyone's talking about certain things, but is there, and maybe there isn't, but is there something we're not talking about that perhaps we should be, that you've identified, and you'd like to speak to that?
I think going back to what we mentioned earlier about the young people that are coming up in the world, there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people in their, you know, I've got a son who's 30 who's finally found a direction in his life.
Mm-hmm.
Angela's got a son who's 30 who's still struggling to find out where they want to go and what they
Mm-hmm.
want to do, and it's fine. But you know, once again, it's different than when we were growing up, where you know we had a direction on early,
Uh-huh.
and I think there needs to be more education in the lower school levels, having to do with direction from a trades perspective. You know, Germany has a fantastic program to identify people early on what they're good at and what they're not. And from a technology perspective, I think it's super important to find people with skill sets that would help us as a nation and a world to be able to advance our civilization and our culture going forward. And I think that we've lost too much into, you know, the wantingness of materialistic things. I'm not trying to get esoteric on you, that we need, you know, we need a new car, we need to do this, we need that, but you don't really want to get the effort to be able to get there to do it. Level of entitlement that's happening, you know, and it's our fault as parents, you know, you know, we've done that, and our parents kind of did it for us.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what happened to that one saying on my grandmother's wall that I remember, you know, 50 years ago. You know, a penny saved is a penny earned. Okay,
Yeah, oh, yeah,
that's an old saying that
it
seems to have
is.
lost perspective. And so I think that in our industry right here, you've got to have an open mind, and you've got to be able to say, hey, things are where I've been successful in my life is being able to identify things that are changing and not stick my head in the sand and saying,
Right.
I need to make a change to be able to move. And now maybe this next change that I'm doing isn't going to be successful. Maybe it's not. I don't know. You know, I mean, but I'm passionate about what we need to do and how to get there. And I'm going to work
Right.
toward hard to be able to get to that point. And maybe I need to pivot in 6 months or a year from now. Who knows? But have that attitude that you know, things do change. Life is variable.
Ken,
And
do you have any other questions for Phil?
No, Phil, yeah, thanks for that walk down memory lane. I got started programming EEPROM chips for my grandfather.
okay, okay,
So
okay. Yeah,
when you
yeah,
started talking about that, I was like, dang, remember that stupid little thing I plugged the chips into?
yeah,
So
yeah.
Erasable programmable ROM. Wow, I haven't heard that term
exactly.
in a
It
long
Pro,
was
time.
program prom PROM, yeah,
right.
programmable
Yes.
read-only memory, yeah. And
Yes.
once again,
Yes.
I remember 1702 A's. I don't know why that number came across, and I think it was a 2K prom, right? And
Uh-huh.
so
Wow.
yeah, good memories on that stuff. But you know,
Yeah.
those things are to today's generation are ubiquitous. You know, you have what I have 256 gigabytes on my phone,
I
right? Or
know.
512 gigabytes. I mean,
It's
it's
crazy.
beyond the
Right.
comprehension of where that's changing, and it will change dramatically as we go along. It'll get
Absolutely.
better and better. And like I said earlier, if you embrace it, you're going to be with the program. You're going to ride that
Hmm.
wave. If you push against it, you're just fighting a losing battle.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So, well, hey Phil, this has been great. We really appreciate your time today. I'm gonna wind us down here, and to the audience, thanks for joining us. And go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. You can watch us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and always at engagep2p.com. So everybody, until next time, just remember 100% uptime isn't just about technology. It's about your people, your culture, your strategy, and the way you show up every single day. Keep your team strong, your mission clear, and your business running at its very best. Keep building, keep leading, and best of all, most of all, keep it at 100% uptime. Thanks, everybody.